The alien graveyard in the cold depths of space. There was a planet so forgotten that not even the stars seemed to care about it. The surface was barren, cracked, and dry, with only the faint remnants of a long-lost civilization scattered across the landscape. Ancient structures lay in ruin, half buried under layers of dust, their original purpose lost to time. This was no place for the living. It was an alien graveyard, a final resting place for the broken and the forgotten. On this desolate world, in a small clearing surrounded by towering, jagged rocks, lay a young alien girl. Her body, once graceful and full of energy, was now motionless. She was paralyzed from the waist down, unable to move or escape the graveyard she had been abandoned in. Her family, the very ones she had loved, had left her here to die. They saw her condition as a weakness, a burden that couldn't be carried any longer. The girl's name was Kalara, and she had been a warrior in her people's fight to survive. But when the battle turned against her, when the cruel grip of paralysis took hold, her family made a decision that would haunt her forever. They chose to leave her behind. "You're a burden," they had told her coldly, before walking away, leaving her to the harsh silence of the graveyard. Kalara had tried to cry out, tried to crawl after them, but her body refused to obey. All she could do now was wait. The only company she had were the ancient, forgotten bones of the creatures that once roamed this world. They too had been abandoned, left to decay and crumble into dust. Now, Kalara joined their ranks, a forgotten soul in a world where no one cared. The wind howled through the empty graveyard, picking up dust and debris, sending it swirling in all directions. The distant stars above provided no comfort, offering only cold, lifeless light. Kalara lay there, her thoughts as empty as the world around her. She had no hope left. All she wanted now was for the pain to end. But just as the girl was about to close her eyes for what she believed would be the last time, she heard something, a sound that didn't belong in this lifeless place. It was the low hum of a ship's engine, faint but growing louder. Kalara's eyes snapped open, her heart racing despite her weakening body. Was it possible? Had someone finally come for her? Or was it just another cruel trick of the wind? The sound grew louder, closer. Kalara's breath caught in her throat as she strained to hear. The hum turned into a roar, and suddenly, there it was, a ship descending through the thick, dusty atmosphere of the graveyard. It wasn't like the ships she had seen before. It was old, battered, and clearly out of place. Kalara's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to push herself up, but her body betrayed her once again. She couldn't move, couldn't escape. All she could do was watch. The ship crashed into the ground with a deafening sound, throwing up clouds of dust and debris. For a moment, everything was still. Kalara's breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes fixed on the wreckage. Who was inside? Was it another alien? Another group who would leave her to her fate? Or was it someone else entirely? Then, through the dust and the wreckage, a figure emerged. A man, tall, strong, and dressed in strange clothing. Kalara's breath caught in her throat. He was human. He moved with a sense of purpose, quickly assessing the damage to his ship before turning his attention to the alien girl lying on the ground. His face was filled with concern, confusion, and something else, determination. Kalara couldn't understand it. Why was he here? Why would he care about her? A paralyzed alien girl in a graveyard. The human knelt beside her, his eyes scanning, her form as if trying to make sense of the situation. He didn't speak, but his presence felt like a promise that she wouldn't be alone, that maybe, just maybe, someone cared. But Kalara wasn't sure if she could believe it. After everything she had been through, after the pain and the betrayal, could she trust him? Was he just another cruel twist of fate? Another figure in the endless darkness, here only to remind her that she was forgotten? As the man gently reached out, offering his hand to help her, Kalara's mind raced. Could she trust him? Could this human really save her? Or was he just another cruel joke in a world that had long since abandoned her? The uncertainty hung in, the air, thick with tension. For a moment, neither of them moved. Kalara's heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. This moment, this simple act of kindness, could change everything, or it could lead to even more pain and heartbreak. She reached out slowly, hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human would be different. As their hands connected, the quiet graveyard seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The unknown stretched out before them, filled with possibilities, and Kalara felt a flicker of something inside her, a small spark of life. And just like that, her story was no longer over. It was only just beginning. The unexpected hero. The silence of the graveyard was broken by the sound of boots crunching against the dust-covered ground. Kalara's heart raced, each beat seeming to echo in the still air. The human, his face still a mystery, was kneeling beside her, his hands shaking slightly as he assessed her condition. His gaze softened as he took in her paralyzed form, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. There was only determination. Kalara's mind screamed for her to push him away, to tell him to leave her here, just as her family had. But the words wouldn't come. Something about the way he moved, the way he looked at her, made her want to believe that he could help her, that he might actually care. The years of loneliness, of betrayal, crashed over her like a tidal wave, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this human was different. Are you real? She whispered, her voice barely a breath. It was a question she never thought she would ask. Was she dreaming? Had she finally lost her mind? Or had the universe, in some cruel twist of fate, brought this human here to mock her? The man paused, his eyes locking onto hers. He didn't respond at first, his expression unreadable. Kalara wondered if he even understood her language, but then he spoke, his voice soft yet filled with a strange, unshakable confidence. I'm real. And I'm here to help you, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Kalara blinked, her mind struggling to process what was happening. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not even her own people. It was as if he believed in her even when she could barely believe in herself. Why? She managed to ask, her voice raw with emotion. Why help me? I'm nothing. I'm just a broken alien girl. My family left me here to die. The man's eyes softened even further, and for the briefest moment Kalara saw a flicker of something. Compassion? Sadness? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by an unwavering determination. Everyone deserves a chance, he said simply. No one should be left to die alone, and especially not someone like you. Kalara's breath caught in her chest. Someone like her? She wanted to ask what he meant, but the words were stuck in her throat. Instead, she watched as he began to carefully move her. He wasn't rough or hurried. Instead, there was a tenderness in his movements, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, a sleek metallic tool that buzzed with a quiet energy. Kalara felt a sudden jolt of fear, unsure of what this human intended to do next. But the fear quickly faded as the device emitted a soft hum, and she felt a strange warmth spreading through her body. Don't worry, the man said, sensing her unease. This will help stabilize you. It's not much, but it should make it easier for you to move. Kalara could hardly believe it. This human who had just arrived was already trying to help her walk again, but she knew it wouldn't be that easy. Her paralysis was a curse, one that couldn't be fixed with a simple device. She could feel the weight of the pain in her limbs, the years of neglect and abandonment weighing heavily on her body. Yet there was something different in the air now. The pain seemed a little less sharp, the darkness around her a little less suffocating. This human, this stranger, had brought a glimmer of light to her world. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't know if he could understand how much that simple act of kindness meant to her. But she hoped he could. She hoped he could see that she wasn't just some broken alien girl to be left behind. She was someone worthy of help, worthy of care. As the device continued to hum softly, the air around them seemed to change. It was as if the graveyard itself, the ancient, forgotten place that had swallowed up so many lives, was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Kalara could feel it, a shift, a pull in the very fabric of her existence. Something was awakening within her. The human's eyes widened slightly, his hand pausing as he looked at her, sensing the change in the air. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Kalara didn't answer at first. She didn't know what was happening. All she knew was that the energy in her body was building, swirling like a storm. It wasn't just the device, working. No, this was something deeper. Something that had been dormant for so long, buried beneath the weight of her family's betrayal. She could feel it now, the power that had been locked away inside her for so long. It wasn't just her, paralysis that had been hidden. It was her true potential, the power that had been passed down through generations of her people. The power of a warrior, the power of the last of her kind. The man seemed to sense the change as well. He backed away slightly, watching her with a mixture of awe and caution. You're not just some alien, are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kalara's eyes met his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like the broken girl left to die. She felt strong, powerful. "No," she said, her voice steady. "Now, I'm not just an alien. I'm a warrior." The man's expression shifted, a spark of recognition in his eyes. But before either of them could say anything more, a distant rumble echoed through the graveyard. It was low at first, barely a whisper, against the wind. But it grew louder, closer until the ground beneath them began to tremble. "They're coming," Kalara whispered, her voice filled with dread. The human turned, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his side. The warband. Kalara had known this moment would come. She had hoped, perhaps, that it wouldn't. But it was inevitable. The warband, her family's betrayers, were here, and they would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. The human looked at her, his expression serious but determined. "We can't let them take you. We'll fight." Kalara's heart raced as the warband's footsteps grew louder. She wasn't sure if they could survive this. But for the first time in a long time, she had someone by her side. "Let's make sure they regret this," she said, a fierce glint in her eyes. And together, they prepared for what was coming next. The alien warband. The ground trembled beneath Kalara and the human, the approaching footsteps of the warband growing louder with every passing second. The ancient graveyard seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the storm to arrive. Kalara could feel it, something ancient and dangerous just beyond the horizon. It was a feeling that made her blood run cold. This wasn't just a group of mercenaries, no, these were her people, or what was left of them. The ones who had abandoned her, and they were coming for her. The human's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively gripping the weapon at his side, his stance ready. He had no idea what kind of enemies they were facing, but he didn't need to. Something in his gut told him that whatever was coming wasn't just another fight. It was a battle for survival. Kalara could feel the tension in the air. The warband was close now, their footsteps vibrating through the ground. A heavy, foreboding sound that seemed to echo across the graveyard. She could already see their figures looming in the distance, dark silhouettes against the fading light of the dying star above them. They were here. Kalara's breath hitched in her throat. She had heard the stories of the warband that roamed the galaxy, taking what they wanted, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But these weren't just mercenaries. They were the remnants of her people's once great civilization, a group of outcasts and rebels who had refused to follow the laws of the old empire. Now they lived by one rule: survival at any cost, and they had no intention of letting Kalara live. She was a reminder of everything they had failed to protect. A symbol of their shame. The human turned to Kalara, his gaze steady though his lips were pressed into a tight line. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he refused to let it show in his own. He had no idea what they were up against, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. "You don't have to fight," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing. "I'll protect you." Kalara looked up at him, her heart pounding. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want to make him fight for her, but she could already feel the power inside her beginning to stir. It had been dormant for so long, hidden away, buried under the weight of her past. But now, as the warband closed in, it was awakening. She could feel it, a fire building inside her, just waiting to be unleashed. "No," she said softly, her voice stronger than it had been moments before. "I'm not just someone to be protected. I'll fight too." The human looked at her, his brows furrowing in confusion. But before he could say anything more, the warband appeared, emerging from the shadows like a storm on the horizon. They moved as one, a massive group of warriors, their eyes cold and merciless. Their faces were hidden behind helmets and masks, their weapons gleaming with a deadly promise. They were ready for battle. At the front of the group was a towering figure, a leader whose presence commanded attention. Kalara's heart skipped a beat as she recognized him. It was Zorak, the one who had once been her closest friend, her comrade in arms, but now he was a ruthless warrior, a member of the warband that had cast her aside without a second thought. "Kalara," he growled, his voice like gravel. "You were supposed to die in this graveyard. Why are you still breathing?" Kalara's body tensed at the sound of his voice, memories flooding back. Zorak had been the one to promise her that they would fight together, that nothing could tear them apart. But when the paralysis took hold, when she became a liability, he was the first to walk away. Now he was standing before her, a cold shadow of the friend she had once known. "You left me here to die," Kalara said, her voice cold with anger. "You and your people abandoned me." Zorak's expression twisted into a sneer. "You were weak. We had no choice. You were a burden to us." Kalara's fists clenched at her sides, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the fire inside her rise. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a burden. And she wasn't going to let Zorak or anyone else dictate her fate. Not anymore. The human stepped forward, his hand still gripping the weapon at his side, but Kalara stopped him with a glance. She wasn't going to hide behind him anymore. It was time to take control of her own story. "You think you can just walk in here and take what you want?" Kalara said, her voice steady, each word laced with the power that was beginning to build inside her. "I won't let you." Zorak's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his hand resting on the hilt of his own weapon. "You have no choice, Kalara. This is our world now. You belong to us." "Not anymore," Kalara whispered, her voice carrying a quiet intensity. Without warning, a surge of energy burst from her, flooding her entire being. She could feel it, power crackling at her fingertips, building in her core. The device the human had used to stabilize her seemed to hum in response, amplifying the energy that had been dormant for so long. It was more than just a physical reaction. It was something deeper, something ancient and unstoppable. The warband froze for a moment, their eyes widening in shock as Kalara's energy swirled around her. Even Zorak, who had once been her closest ally, took a cautious step back. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. Kalara's eyes blazed with a newfound strength. She had been a prisoner of her own weakness for so long, but now she was free. Free to embrace her true power, free to fight back. "This is who I really am," she said, her voice like a storm. "This is the last of the old blood, and I will not let you destroy everything my people once stood for." The air around them crackled with tension. The warband was stunned, unsure of how to react to the force standing before them. Kalara's body glowed with the energy of her ancestors, her warrior spirit awakened. And the human, standing beside her, watched in awe as the girl he had only just met became a force to be reckoned with. Zorak took a step back, but his eyes were filled with rage. "You will regret this, Kalara," he spat. "You will regret defying us." Kalara's response was simple, but powerful. Bring it on. And with that, the battle for her future, and for the fate of her people, began. The alien betrayal. The air in the alien graveyard was heavy with tension, as if the planet itself was waiting for the confrontation that was about to unfold. Kalara stood firm, her body glowing with the power of her ancestors, every pulse of energy flowing through her veins like fire. The human stood beside her, his eyes locked on the approaching warband, ready to fight. Yet, as the warband began to regroup, Kalara's heart pounded with a new, unsettling emotion. Something wasn't right. The battle, though imminent, felt different now. Personal. Kalara's gaze drifted to Zorak, the warband leader, his once familiar face now twisted with hatred and contempt. He had been her friend, her comrade in arms, before everything fell apart. He had been the one who had promised her that they would fight together, that nothing could tear them apart. But that was before her paralysis had rendered her useless in their eyes. That was before the betrayal. You still don't understand, do you? Kalara spoke, her voice shaking with both anger and a deep, aching sorrow. You think this is about survival, but it's not. You left me behind because I was weak, because I was a burden. You left me to die. Zorak's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he stepped forward. You were a liability, Kalara, a weakness. We had no choice. The word stung like a physical blow, but Kalara refused to back down. She had heard them 1,000 times in her mind, ever since that fateful day when they had abandoned her. But now, standing before the warband, she had no time for their justifications. She wasn't the girl they had left behind. She was something more, something stronger, and she would make them see it. We all have a choice, Zorak, Kalara said, her voice laced with a quiet fury. But you chose to betray me. You chose to walk away, to leave me for dead. And now, you're going to pay for it. The tension between them was palpable, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to stop. The warband members stood frozen as if unsure of what to do next, but Zorak's eyes were cold, devoid of remorse, his hand tightening around the weapon at his side. You've made your choice, Kalara, he said, his voice low and threatening. And now you'll face the consequences. With a sudden, powerful motion, Zorak lunged forward, his blade flashing in the dim light. Kalara barely had time to react, her instincts kicking in just as the weapon came down toward her. She raised her hands in defense, summoning the power within her to create a shield of energy. The impact of the blade against her shield sent a shockwave through the air, rattling the ground beneath them. The human reacted instantly, drawing his own weapon and charging toward the warband. But Kalara held up a hand, stopping him. Stay back, she ordered, her voice steady but commanding. This is my fight. The human hesitated, his eyes flicking between Kalara and the warband. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. This was more than just a physical battle. This was a fight for Kalara's soul, for her identity, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that from her. The warband closed in, their weapons raised, their eyes filled with malice. Kalara felt her power surge within her, a force of will stronger than any weapon. She wasn't going to let them win, not again. But just as the battle seemed inevitable, something unexpected happened. One of the warband members, a tall, slender, alien with jagged scars across his face, stepped forward. His eyes were narrowed, his gaze flicking between Kalara and Zorak. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice, the words carrying a weight of authority that cut through the tension in the air. Enough, Zorak, he said, his voice sharp. This isn't what we came here for. The warband leader froze, his blade still raised, but his eyes shifted toward the scarred alien, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. What do you mean? Zorak growled. The girl's power is too great. The scarred alien continued, his voice cold and calculating. She could destroy us all if we're not careful. Kalara's heart skipped a beat as she listened to the alien's words. She had known, deep down, that her power was dangerous, that it could destroy everything in its path. But hearing it from someone else made it feel all too real. And yet, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had been broken once before, and she wasn't going to let anyone do that to her again. "You left me to die," Kalara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You left me to rot in this graveyard, and now you want to control me. You want to use my power for your own gain. But I won't let you." Zorak's eyes flickered with something, maybe fear, maybe doubt, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. "You don't understand, Kalara. We're trying to save you. We're trying to give you a purpose again." "You don't get to decide that," Kalara snapped, her voice steady but fierce. "I have a purpose, and it's not to serve you." The scarred alien exchanged a glance with Zorak, a silent conversation passing between them. Kalara could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected her to fight back, to stand up for herself with the strength of her ancestors coursing through her. But just as she thought the warband might retreat, Zorak barked an order, and the group surged forward, their weapons raised, high. Kalara didn't hesitate. She gathered every ounce of her strength, every drop of power, and released it in a blinding surge of energy. The force of her blast sent shockwaves through the graveyard, throwing the warband members back and scattering them like dust. The air crackled with raw power, and for a moment it felt like the entire world was on the brink of collapse. But through the chaos, Kalara saw something, a flicker of recognition in Zorak's eyes. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. It was regret. And in that brief moment, Kalara understood. This battle wasn't just about survival. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about reclaiming her place in the galaxy. It was about proving that she wasn't just a broken girl, abandoned and forgotten. She was a warrior. The warband slowly recovered. But Kalara's heart was resolute. She wasn't going to let them control her. Not anymore. "This ends now," she said, her voice cutting through the dust and chaos. "You'll never control me again." Zorak's expression twisted with rage, but he knew, deep down, that Kalara had already won. She had taken control of her own fate, and no one, not even her own people, could take that away from her. The warband stood before her, their weapons still raised, but Kalara didn't flinch. She was ready for whatever came next. Because she knew now. She wasn't just fighting for her survival, she was fighting for her freedom. The hidden power, the battle had only just begun, but Kalara could feel something within her stir, something ancient, something powerful. The energy coursing through her was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't just the power of her ancestors. It was something deeper, something she had buried long ago, hidden beneath layers of pain, betrayal, and fear. Now, in the heart of the alien graveyard, surrounded by those who had once been her family, that power was awakening. The warband had fallen back, their weapons lowered, their expressions a mix of confusion and awe. Kalara had released a surge of energy that had shattered their ranks, knocking them off balance, but they hadn't expected her to be capable of such raw force. They had underestimated her, just as everyone always had. The human stood beside her, his gaze fixed on her with a mix of admiration and concern. He could see the change in her, could feel the electricity in the air, but he didn't understand. He didn't know what was happening to her. All he knew was that the girl he had found in the graveyard was no longer the same. She was something else entirely. "Kalara," the human said, his voice steady but tinged with worry. "What's happening? To you?" Kalara turned to him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that was almost blinding. She had no answer for him. Not yet. She didn't fully understand it herself. But one thing was certain. The power inside her was no longer just a potential. It was a force, a storm, ready to change everything. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But I feel it. It's inside me. It's not just the paralysis. It's something more." The human frowned, his eyes scanning her face, trying to understand what she meant. But before he could ask anything further, a sudden scream shattered the moment. It came from Zorak, who had been watching from the edge of the battlefield. His eyes were wide and his mouth was open in a soundless snarl. "This isn't over," he bellowed, his voice filled with fury. "You cannot control this power, Kalara. No one can." The words sent a chill through Kalara's spine. He was right. She had no idea what was happening to her, or how much control she truly had over the power that was flooding her veins. But what she did know was that she couldn't let Jorak or anyone take it from her. This power was hers, and she wasn't going to let it destroy her like it had destroyed her people. As Jorak raised his hand, the ground beneath them trembled. Suddenly, a massive crack split the earth, sending debris flying into the air. Kalara's heart skipped a beat. She had seen this before. This was the power of the graveyard itself, a place infused with the energy of the ancient civilization that had once lived here. But the warband's use of it was different. They had always abused its power, used it for their own gain. Now Jorak was trying to wield it, trying to control the very thing that had once destroyed his people. "No," Kalara muttered under her breath, clenching her fists. "This ends now." She stepped forward, every step in sync with the pounding of her heart. The air seemed to crackle around her as she gathered the power inside, pulling it from deep within. The earth itself, from the remnants of her people's lost civilization. The energy surged, swirling around her, forming a visible aura of pure light. For a moment, everything was still. The graveyard, the warband, the human beside her. Everything seemed to pause as if waiting for what would come next. Then, without warning, Kalara released the energy. The shockwave sent ripples through the graveyard, the ground beneath them trembling as if the planet itself had awoken. The warband was thrown back, their weapons clattering to the ground, their bodies skidding across the broken earth. Kalara stood at the center of the storm, her body glowing with an otherworldly light, her face a mask of determination. Jorak scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This can't be," he whispered, his voice cracking. You're controlling it. You shouldn't be able to control it." "I'm not controlling it," Kalara replied, her voice calm, but full of a newfound strength. "This isn't about control. It's about freedom. My freedom." The warband leader's expression twisted with rage. "You're a fool, Kalara. You have no idea what you're unleashing." "Maybe," Kalara said, her voice steady and firm. "But at least I'm no longer afraid of it." The ground rumbled again, but this time it was different. The energy that Kalara had released was not a destructive force. It was the catalyst for something much bigger. The graveyard began to shift as if the planet itself was responding to the power that Kalara had awakened. The ancient structures around them began to pulse with light, the ruins vibrating with an ancient hidden energy that had been dormant for centuries. And at the center of it all, Kalara stood, her body connected to the very essence of the planet, her power growing stronger with each passing second. The human watched in awe, his mouth slightly open. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this. Kalara was no longer just the girl he had found in the graveyard. She was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the ancient power that had once ruled this world. And he realized, in that moment, that the fate of the galaxy could very well depend on her. "Kalara," the human said, his voice filled with wonder and fear. You're something else." Kalara turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "I am what my people were meant to be, and I will not let anyone take that away from me again." As the warband regrouped, their fear palpable, Kalara knew that the real battle was just beginning. This power, this gift, this curse, was hers to wield, but with it came a responsibility. And she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Still, there was no going back. The past had been erased. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Kalara would no longer be a victim of her circumstances. She would no longer be the broken girl abandoned in a graveyard. She was a warrior, and she was about to change everything. With a final surge of energy, Kalara sent a shockwave through the graveyard, sending the warband scattering once again. She had awakened the hidden power inside her, and now, nothing could stop her. The warband may have thought they controlled the graveyard, but they were about to learn the truth. The graveyard was her inheritance, and it was time to reclaim it. The truth of her legacy. The graveyard that had once been her prison now hummed with an eerie power, the ancient ruins shifting and pulsing in response to Kalara's awakening. The air was thick with energy, crackling with a force that no one could fully comprehend, not even Kalara herself. She stood at the center, her eyes glowing with the intensity of her newfound strength, every muscle in her body vibrating with the pulse of the planet beneath her feet. The warband, battered and stunned, was regrouping once again, but this time Kalara wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move. "It's time," she whispered to herself, her voice strong, yet tinged with a quiet resolve. She had spent years buried under the weight of betrayal and abandonment, but now she could finally see the truth. The truth of her people's legacy. The truth of what she was meant to become. The human, standing beside her, watched in awe. He had seen Kalara fight with unimaginable power, but now he saw something else, something deeper. He saw the weight of a lineage that stretched back for centuries, something she had never fully understood until now. Kalara wasn't just a girl who had been left behind. She was the last living descendant of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. And with that, blood came not just power, but a responsibility. "You're not just fighting for your life anymore," the human said, his voice low with understanding. "You're fighting for the entire galaxy." Kalara didn't respond at first. Her focus was on the warband, who were now slowly advancing, their weapons raised, their expressions hardened with defiance. Zorak led them, his eyes still wide with disbelief. He had seen the energy Kalara wielded, and it terrified him. But Kalara could sense something else in him now, something she hadn't expected. Regret. Fear. Maybe even guilt. "You have no idea what you've unleashed, Kalara," Zorak shouted, his voice filled with anger and confusion. "This isn't just about power. This is about control. If you continue down this path, you'll bring about the end of everything we've fought for." Kalara's gaze never wavered. She didn't flinch at his words. She had heard them before. But now, they meant nothing to her. She wasn't the girl he had abandoned in the graveyard anymore. She wasn't the one who had been cast aside as weak. No, she was something much more. "You never understood what we were meant to be, Zorak," Kalara called out, her voice ringing through the battlefield. "This power isn't a curse, it's a gift. It's the gift of my ancestors, and you can't control it anymore. No one can." The ground shook beneath them, the ruins around them groaning as if the planet itself was alive, reacting to the awakening of the ancient power. Kalara's eyes burned with determination, her fists clenched at her sides. She felt the power surging within her, stronger than ever, and for the first time, she understood its true purpose. This wasn't just about survival. This wasn't about revenge. This was about legacy, about reclaiming the past and forging a new future. "My people were the rulers of the stars," Kalara continued, her voice carrying an authority she had never known she possessed. "We had the power to create, to destroy, to shape the galaxy as we saw fit. And you, Zorak, were the ones who betrayed that. You were the ones who allowed it all to fall apart." The warband leader's face twisted with fury, but Kalara could see the cracks in his armor. He was scared. He knew he had lost control, and he knew that there was nothing he could do to stop her. "You don't understand," Zorak snarled, his voice trembling with fear. "This power, it's dangerous. It will destroy everything. It will consume you." Kalara stepped forward, her gaze unwavering, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You've already tried to destroy me, Zorak. You've already cast me aside like I was nothing. But I'm not nothing, and I'm not afraid of this power. I was born to wield it." The energy around her intensified, swirling in a whirlwind of light and force. The warband hesitated, their weapons lowered, fear creeping into their eyes. They had never seen anything like this before. Nothing that even resembled the raw, untamed power that Kalara now commanded. They had thought that she was weak, that her paralysis had made her a liability. But now, they saw her for what she truly was. The last of her kind. And she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everything her people had lost. As Jorak moved to raise his weapon, Kalara's body instinctively reacted, her energy flaring in a protective shield that sent shockwaves through the graveyard. The warband scattered, their eyes wide with fear as the ground beneath them cracked and split open, revealing long-buried secrets from her ancestors. Ancient machines dormant for centuries began to stir, their metallic limbs creaking to life, as if they too were answering the call of their rightful heir. "You've awakened the tomb," Zorak hissed, stumbling back. "You've awakened them all." Kalara's heart skipped a beat. The tomb, the ancient technology that had once been used by her people. She had read about it in the old texts, but she had never truly understood its significance. Now, as the machines rose from the earth, she saw the truth. The tomb wasn't just a graveyard, it was a weapon built to preserve her people's legacy, a weapon built to protect the galaxy from destruction. And now, it was in her hands. The machines, towering and imposing, turned their gaze toward her, waiting for her command. Kalara's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. The burden of the past, the future, and everything in between. This power was hers to wield. But how would she use it? Would she destroy everything her people had built, just as the warband feared? Or would she rebuild? "We've come too far," Jorak growled, raising his weapon one last time. "You can't stop us." Kalara closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on the energy inside her, feeling the pulse of her ancestors, the strength of her bloodline. She knew what she had to do. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was their legacy. And that legacy wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to heal. "No," Kalara said softly, opening her eyes. "This ends with me, and it ends with peace." With a single powerful gesture, Kalara released the energy. The machines reacted instantly, their movements fluid and precise as they reached out to disarm the warband, their enormous metallic hands grabbing weapons and pulling them from their owners. The warband had no choice but to surrender, their once mighty weapons now rendered useless in the face of the ancient technology Kalara had awakened. The warband leader, defeated, stood, frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Kalara had won, and as she looked around, she realized something that made her heart swell with both pride and sorrow. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was the first of a new beginning, a beginning where her people's legacy would not be defined by power and destruction, but by the hope of rebirth. The warband was defeated. But Kalara knew that her journey had only just begun. Now, she would rebuild. Now she would decide how to use the power of her people, not to destroy, but to protect, to heal, and to restore the balance that had been lost. The legacy of her people was in her hands, and she would not let it slip away. The final battle and redemption, the battlefield was silent now, the dust settling in the air like a thick fog. Kalara stood alone at the center of the graveyard, the towering machines of her ancestors standing at attention around her. Their massive forms were a stark contrast to the crumbled ruins of the once great civilization, but they now represented the future of her people, a future she was finally ready to embrace. The warband had been defeated. Jorak and his followers had been disarmed, their weapons useless in the face of the ancient technology she had awakened. But the battle wasn't over, not yet. The weight of her victory felt strange, like an unshackled freedom, but with it came an undeniable truth. Her true test was just beginning. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was the one who would decide the fate of the galaxy, the fate of everything her ancestors had built. And that responsibility, heavy as it was something she couldn't ignore. Kalara took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the warband members now kneeling before her. Jorak, once her closest ally, was now a shadow of the leader he had been, defeated and broken. His eyes locked with hers, filled with regret and defeat. But there was something else there too. something more human than the warrior he had become. Kalara could see it now. The fear of losing everything he had fought for, the weight of his past mistakes. She stepped forward, her energy still humming with the power of the ancient tomb, but her heart beat steadily in her chest. "It doesn't have to end like this, Jorak," she said, her voice calm but filled with the undeniable strength she had found within herself. "There is another way. We can rebuild. We can restore what we lost." For a long moment, Jorak didn't respond. He just stared at her, his eyes shifting between anger and despair. Then he spoke, his voice rough, almost broken. "You don't understand, Kalara. Everything we've fought for, everything we've sacrificed, it was for nothing. We destroyed it all. My people. We failed. And now you're here, trying to fix something that can't be fixed." Kalara's eyes softened as she listened to him, her heart aching for the pain he carried. She could see that Jorak had been consumed by guilt, by a belief that his actions had sealed the fate of their people forever, but she wouldn't let him carry that burden alone. She couldn't. "It's not too late," Kalara said, stepping closer, her hand outstretched toward him. "We have the power to change the future. We have the strength to heal what's been broken. We can rebuild together." The warband leader looked at her hand, his eyes filled with doubt. He had abandoned her once. Could she really trust him now? Kalara could feel his hesitation, but she knew what he needed to hear. She knew what she had to say to him. "The power I carry isn't just for destruction, Jorak," Kalara continued, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "It's for creation, for protection, for redemption. We can heal this galaxy, but only if we choose to fight for something greater than ourselves." Slowly, Jorak's gaze lifted from her outstretched hand to her eyes. There was a long pause, a moment filled with the weight of years of pain and loss. Then, as if a decision had been made within him, he lowered his weapon. "I can't undo what I've done," he said softly. "But I will stand by you. Whatever happens next, I will fight with you." Kalara felt a surge of relief and hope as he spoke. She knew that this was the turning point, not just for Jorak, but for herself and for the future of the galaxy. They could heal. Together, they could restore balance to a fractured world. Just then, a low rumble shook the ground beneath them, and Kalara's heart skipped a beat. The sky overhead darkened, the atmosphere heavy with an unknown force. Kalara's eyes narrowed, her senses on high alert. Something was wrong. Something was coming. "We're not done yet," she whispered to the human standing beside her. "There's something else at play here, something we haven't seen." Before she could say another word, the ground erupted in a series of violent tremors. The ancient machines around them began to shift and move, as if responding to a hidden command. Kalara's eyes widened in realization. The tomb, it wasn't just a place of power. It was a beacon, a signal to something or someone waiting in the dark reaches of the galaxy. And now that signal had been heard. From the shadows of the distant mountains, a massive silhouette appeared on the horizon. It was unlike anything Kalara had ever seen. An enormous ship, dark and sleek, with pulsing energy fields surrounding it. The ship was coming closer, and the air seemed to grow colder with each passing second. "They're here," Kalara murmured, her voice tight. With realization, the ones who left us behind, the true rulers of this galaxy, the ones who abandoned us long ago. The human's eyes widened with disbelief. "Who are they?" Kalara didn't answer immediately. She was too focused, too consumed by the sight of the ship drawing nearer. But she knew deep down that this was the ultimate test. The true battle for the fate of the galaxy had arrived, and it wasn't just about her legacy. It was about the future of every living being in the stars. "They are my people," Kalara said, her voice filled with a strange mix of fear and determination. "They are the ones who betrayed us, the ones who cast us aside. And now, they've come to finish what they started." The war band looked around, their faces filled with shock. Even Zorak seemed to hesitate as if unsure of what to do next. Kalara felt the weight of the decision in the pit of her stomach. This was it. This was the final battle. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. She had the strength of her ancestors within her and the support of those who had once turned their backs on her. They would fight together. They would stand against the ones who had abandoned them. "Ready yourselves," Kalara said, her voice steely with resolve. "This battle isn't just for survival. It's for the future of our people. And it's time to take back what's ours." The massive ship loomed closer, and Kalara felt the pulse of power surge within her once more. Her legacy, her people's legacy, wasn't one of destruction. It was one of redemption, of rebuilding what had been lost. She had the power to change the galaxy, but first she had to survive the final battle. The air crackled with tension as the first wave of attackers descended from the ship. Kalara felt the weight of everything she had fought for, everything she had lost and everything she was about to gain. But one thing was certain. This battle would not be like the others. This time, she was no longer the girl abandoned in the graveyard. She was the last of her people, the first of a new future, and she would not let anyone take that away. The final battle had begun, and Kalara was ready.